Hello, and welcome to Friendship, Wellness, and Wisdom with your hosts, Heather and Rachel.
Together, we're here to talk about all things self-care, from fitness to mindfulness and everything in between.
Whether it's yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates, or practices like tapping and meditation, we're here to help you discover new ways to care for yourself.
We'll also share tips on positive self-talk, finding time for self-care, and creating routines that stick.
We're here to provide you with plenty of tips, tricks, and unsolicited life advice.
Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Join our community, and together we can explore the path to wellness. Hello and welcome. So today on the show, we are going to be talking about the difference between reacting versus responding to certain situations, what the difference is, and why we react or overreact at times, and what we can do to kind of notice that reaction, and then to work on switching that over to responding instead of just reacting when stuff happens, and coming from a place of a little bit more control. So Heather's got a blog up on this on the Bountiful Yogi, correct? Yep. Website. So check that out. And we're going to dive into some questions, and we're going to find out, number one, what it is that causes us to react or overreact in certain situations. And then we're going to look again at some interventions as to how we can change that into being present and responding to what's going on. So I came up with some questions as to 10 reasons why we react. But the first thing I think I'm going to ask, and we can go over this quickly, is I just want to ask you, like, what is the difference? Like, when you break it down to, like, what is reacting, and then as opposed to what is responding?
So when we react, it is usually from a place of an emotional I want to say response, but it's not really a response, right? But it is usually emotionally driven, right? So a reaction is usually fear-based or stress-based or confusion. Confusion's a big one that people react to, maybe an insecurity. And so when people react, it's not a thought-out process. It's really an emotionally driven bite back, really, is what winds up happening. And that's what makes it a reaction, right?
It's almost like a reflex, like a physical reflex almost.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more, it has a little bit more of a bite to it. Like a react is more, maybe a little bit more aggressive, maybe a little less thought out.
Definitely.
Right? And it really doesn't take the conversation into a moving forward place, right? A reaction winds up being like very abrupt and very sharp, or it could be even rolling into a tangent. Sometimes reactions have nothing to do with even what you're talking about, but something now it has a trigger response.
It triggered you, and now you yes, and I think most of us have experienced that from time to time.
Yeah, and then responding is something that is thoughtful, and that is, you think about it and you're digesting the information so you can have a thought out response.
Yes,
right?
I feel like you're more calm and present, like as to what is happening right now, as opposed to like remembering something that kind of brings that on.
And not only that, like when you respond, even if it isn't like this thesis of a response, right? This great, epiphany of a response. It could be just a response of, your response could be, you know what? I'm not really understanding what we're talking about. Can you please reframe that?
Yeah.
Can you please, explain to me what the point is that you're trying to give to me, or, something like that. So
let's find out kind of what it is that why we have these reactions and why we react or overreact as opposed to like being calm and responding to what's happening in a situation. First question I have is like, why do we react quickly, like in a stressful situation? Like what makes us like just kind of act before we have time to think?
So when we're stressed, right? When we have those stress responses going on, like everything is kind of knee jerk, right? Not really taking in the information, and that you're not processing all that information in a stressful situation. And so you have some people that are really, really great in stressful situations, and some people that just completely fall apart. And it's just like, this is not a good place for you. But, stress kind of like settles in the body, right? So you're already tensed up when you're stressed. You have like a body language when you're stressed and things like that. Your brain automatically looks at it as a potential threat, right? And so you kind of want that threat to go away. So you're like a puffer fish, right? You're just like, hey, like you just blow up to the biggest portion of you, and you're just like, I'm reacting to this situation and I want it to stop, right? Usually it just escalates the situation. But that's usually what it is.
In my experience, it definitely escalates the situation. And it's really funny. So like, and I have a few points that I want to bring up, but I'll hold off a little bit. So now with fear, right? So I kind of asked like, how does fear make us react impulsively? And I feel like a lot of this is going to be kind of the same thing, right? So it's just, it's a lot about it's survival instinct. It's that
absolutely
fight or flight.
We go into the primal instinct. We have fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? And so, even when you're reacting and words are not coming out of your mouth, body language is reacting.
Yeah.
Sighing. I used to call it the breathing wars. Like these, who could breathe the loudest in this tense situation?
Wow. Passive aggressive breathing. Let's go. Like,
and so walking away, mid conversation, or walking out, and and things like that. And now walking away is a good way to gather yourself, but some people walk out and make a scene, and and so those are all reactionary.
Well, there are some times where you can't do that though too, and like, okay, and in a fearful situation, a lot of times like the reaction might be to freeze, and just shut down completely.
Absolutely.
But again, it's also kicked in by that like basic like that primal instinct. Like we go right back down into that, like that nervous system reaction.
And honestly, like this is a skill, right? This is a skill that, number one, we're not really taught, right? We are not really taught how to respond instead of react. Think about your siblings, right? Think about how you grow up with siblings, the kids on the block or whatever. And we are not really trained or prepped for, things coming at us all the time.
No.
And my great like thought process is siblings. Like siblings really are the people. And if you're an only child, you might deal with this with cousins or whatever. But the reality is, when you have people that are in your family, right, they really are prepping you for the world outside, right? And so how do you deal with your brother and sister, right? How do you deal with your siblings? Are you very just compassionate and empathetic? And
God, no.
Right?
People tell me that they're like that with their siblings, and I'm like, you guys are weird. Like,
but I challenge people when they say that they are like that. That's developed through age and maturity and time.
But I do. It depends on a lot of it. Depends on like your family situation, your parents, or anyone that you're living with, and how they act or react in situations. Like, I mean, we were around each other's families a lot. no one was responding in my household, okay?
No.
It was always a reaction. And
Yeah.
I got to a certain age and didn't understand why people weren't more outraged, like when certain things happened.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, like, I mean, that was it. Like, why aren't you reacting to this? Like,
Right.
because
And
that's all anyone ever did around me. And then, like,
but
people
that's
would be
what
like,
I'm
"You're
saying.
so dramatic," and I'm like,
It really is a skill that you have to hone in for
yeah.
yourself. I have a friend that her mom, she calls her mom a bubble person. And what she means by that is like her mom just nothing affects her. And she's like, she lives in this bubble and she never ever shows any kind of effect to anything. But that's her coping mechanism, right?
Right.
So she doesn't react nor respond. She just is like, everything's good, no matter what.
Yeah.
Which did not teach my friend those coping skills. Did
Right.
not
Yeah.
teach
Because
my
you're like,
friend.
nothing you do. What do? You just
Right.
pretend like it's not happening.
Yes. And so my friend would always react because she wanted a reaction from her mom.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
And so it's like, it is a skill that you have to kind of like, as you mature and things, you have to like hone in on.
But I feel like what a lot of people don't understand, and as I've been doing like research like through the years to help myself like learn how to, better respond to things, as opposed to constantly reacting. I mean, I did have some trauma. I had been in a car accident. I had gotten injured, and I noticed with me for a very long time, my nervous system was just completely out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
So certain things I was reacting to, and I had almost like, and it was a straight up physical reaction. I didn't even have a split second to kind of think about it. It wasn't like a thought out,
Yeah.
and then I thought, and then I said something like, I'd be driving in a car and I'd hit a bump and I'd just be
Yeah.
like this. And my husband and the kids are like, what is wrong with you? You're like scaring me. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, it wasn't like I had a minute to think and then be scared. I just went right to that physical reaction.
Yeah.
And I have been working for a really long time to learn how to to calm all that down.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really good. So like we talk about, and you have all these great long answers. And the funny thing is I feel like the answers to most of them are the same.
Mm-hmm.
What's different is the question and what it is that is all these different scenarios that cause us to have these reactions. And I feel like I should have like framed it a little bit differently, because I feel like what's happening is we're having these automatic reactions as a nervous system response to things like fear, trauma, intense emotion.
It can be as easy as lack of sleep. It can be as heavy as childhood trauma, abuse, or something like that. We look at our development, right? When we look at how we interact with other people and how we interact with ourselves, our self-talk has a lot to do with it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Like if we have this really negative self-talk and somebody says, oh, that color drowns you out. Holy bananas.
Yeah, I know.
You done did it now, right? You have, and that's where that empathy comes in, right? That's where the understanding towards the other person comes in, where you have to have empathy to be able to respond, right? You have to take it outside of you. Completely different topic, but it leads into this. Taking things personal, right? I just wrote a blog about taking things personal. Nothing ever, and me and my husband talk about this all the time, and we don't see this the same. But the reality is nothing is ever personal to you. Nothing. If I make a comment to you, the reason why I'm making the comment is because it's my perception.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is how I feel about something. It is how I perceive something. It has nothing to do with you. maybe something you are doing or wearing or saying reminds me of something or triggers something within me to make a comment. But the reality is, it is not personal towards you. And so if we don't retract and get into our own brain and get into our own emotions and get some empathy and understanding, we automatically take it personal and then,
and then we react.
Yeah, or overreact.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I'm great for that. Like, and it's funny, I noticed, somewhere in my adult life that I was reacting to things, like, and overreacting to things that didn't even actually upset me. Like, it was just something that I was so used to seeing other people in my family do, and it was such a response that had been repeated for so long that I caught myself, with my own children going, I'm not actually even upset, like, with this. I don't even know why I'm having this reaction, because I'm like, honestly, when I think about it, like, this doesn't bother me at all.
Yes.
But I was like so ready to be outraged because it bothered, like, my mom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait,
I have
I'm not even upset.
I have another example for you that, my granddaughter is so amazing. She is 6 and she is just full of spirit. And my mom was talking to my youngest son, and they were talking about just a situation from his injury, right? And my mom said something about him feeling weak because of the injury that he had. And my granddaughter only caught the back end of that, that my mom was calling her uncle weak. And her 6-year-old body went into my mom's room and said, "You need to be nicer to my uncle." And we had to have a discussion on, was uncle upset that you felt like you had to come to his, had to come to his aid? And she was like, "No." And I said, "And did you know the full conversation?" "No." We had to break down.
I wish somebody would have done that with me when I was 6, because it could have saved, like, a lot of stressful conversations.
And we did. We had to break it down for her. Like, it is not yours to own. You don't really know what's going on in the situation. Was uncle visually upset? Did he say he was? No, he wasn't upset at all. And she was appalled that he wasn't upset.
Right. But it's hard because, she's in different places. And when even if it's at school, like, when you see other people react like that and you start to take it on, it just becomes a habit that, but like I said, I've caught myself too doing that, where I was like, this doesn't even, like, this isn't affecting me. It doesn't bother me.
Right. And we have it in society all the time. People react to something that doesn't even offend somebody else.
Well, yeah, no. And I'm like, I've been, I've caught, like I said, I've caught myself, like, way too many times. Like, thankfully, I'm a very self-aware person. And I'm like, all right, this is something that I am now going to address, because not really how I want to be showing up. So, but here's the great thing. If you tend to react or overreact, a lot of things you can do as interventions to, like, kind of, when you feel yourself doing this, to kind of stop, think about what you're doing, and respond in a different manner. Look at some of our resources and some of the things that we can do to help us respond instead.
So one of our great responses is breathing, right? Yeah. It takes 3 seconds for your brain to process. When you think about that, 3 seconds is a long time. And I know people don't think it is, but 3 seconds is. If you count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, that's how long it takes your brain to process something. So taking some breaths and actually breathing through that time for processing is huge. It helps the nervous system. It promotes relaxation. It promotes calm. It actually takes you and helps you process, right? The more air your brain gets, the better your brain works. And so giving your brain more oxygen, giving your body more oxygen, so you're not tense, you're not heightened, it really is a great thing to do.
Yeah, and that'll actually help. The more you do that, the more your body will kind of just start, instead of going into that reaction,
Mm-hmm.
your reaction will be to kind of stop and take a breath. I mean, that is one thing that I found for me. Like the more I practice that, the more I come into that situation, and I'm just like, sometimes I'll just be like, just so I can get the physical action in there, right? Because my body just so wants to be a part of everything. So like, I really just kind of very physically take that breath, but it helps me so much.
And I also, I gave this tool to my granddaughter, saying to somebody, I'm going to have to take a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take a minute. I don't really like the way this is going. I'm going to have to take a minute.
Yeah, no, and I think most people will really respect that. I'm like, you know what? I need to, like, in some situations where you can't do that, I'm like, you know what? I just need a moment to gather my thoughts, and I'm going to get right back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, can't give you that answer right now.
Yeah. And honestly, if I give you that answer right now, it's going to be a reaction, not a response. So
yeah,
right now is not the time for me to.
I've done a lot better with that, like with my children especially. Like it's funny because like in a work situation, I'll catch myself, like I'll be much more apt to like stop, take a beat, and then proceed. Whereas sometimes when it's family, like you go right into that, like because especially if you're scared or you're worried about your kids or
you don't understand.
Like you really just, and it's like the more frightened I am of something like that, the more apt I am to just kind of like blurt things out and respond. So it's a little easier sometimes when you get a text for something, because then I'm like, okay, I can stop, I can reread this 3 times, and then I can like think of questions to ask, where I'm like, what the fuck? Which never ever seems to help.
Never works out.
No, never once has that helped. It's never been helpful. Yet for some reason, physically,
it's there.
My body wants to go there, and I'm like,
and you do so well. Tell everybody, she's little, but she's mighty.
Oh my God. Yeah. You don't want to be around when I'm like,
our next thing is counting to 10, right? Anybody that's a Honeymooners fan, Ralph Cramden in The Honeymooners, he actually goes to a therapist, and the therapist says to him, count to 10. And he counts to 10. And I think the last line is, a happy man is a man who grins, or something like that. And so counting to 10 is the same thing. It's giving yourself that time to breathe through it, to truly process what's going on. So these are a couple coping mechanisms. These are a couple ways to even stay in the situation, but step back, right? Mm-hmm. So you're still in the vicinity of what's going on, but you're just taking those moments. And I encourage people, number one, I'm a huge boundary person, right? I'm huge on boundaries because I feel like that when you set clear expectations and boundaries, you really are setting yourself up for the best version of you. And so setting those expectations of, this conversation is not really feeling comfortable, I really need to step away, give me a few minutes to answer, I want to breathe through this, things like that. As we move through this, mindfulness, like we always go back to mindfulness. And if you are truly in the moment of having a conversation, being there, mindful, being aware of thoughts and emotions, cultivating a pause, making sure you're not listening to respond, but listening to listen, right? So you're huge. really hearing what's going on. And then emotional regulation. Like if something is starting to like just pick at a scab, right? Something's really starting to like check your butt, step back. You have to be like, okay, this right here, and I know I've said this a couple of times. I'm like, this topic
Mm-hmm.
I'm real big on certain topics, politics, religion, those topics. This topic is not a topic I am willing to have with you because I don't like where it's going. Yeah. So we need to move on to a different topic. If we cannot move on to a different topic, our conversation is done.
Yeah, and I've said that to a few people. I'm like, you know what? We're just not going to have this conversation. Right. I'm like, I want to remain friends. Yeah. In order to do that, this is not something we should talk about.
Right. And it's okay, right? Yeah. It is truly okay. And that's the great thing about being an adult, right? Yeah. And having emotional intelligence is to know your boundaries on what you're comfortable with and actually reading somebody else's body language on what they're comfortable with. Like, read the room.
Yeah. There are plenty of times where I'm like, you know what? If we keep going here, I'm going to say something that I know I'm going to regret. So right. we're just not going to.
Yeah, and not everybody is going to, not everybody's going to respond to you. They're going to react, right? Mm-hmm. And so, we're talking about like, everybody does the reaction thing. Clarity and perspective on what you're actually talking about. If you are in super deep waters and you don't really know what you're talking about, it is time to graciously bow out. Yeah. Right? And so you can say, like, I don't really know a lot about this subject and I don't feel comfortable talking about it. Yeah. And some people's ego won't allow them to say that. Right?
No, that's true. Yeah.
And so you can always just be like, you know what? I'm just
that actually it took some practice for me because I don't think not even from like an ego point of view, I just didn't realize like that was a valid thing to say in a conversation. Like most people that I knew, like if you were having like a conflict mm-hmm. or an argument, usually you were trying to get your point across and like wanting to win, like whether you knew about the subject. I know plenty of people who would just argue whether they knew what they were talking about or not, just to win. And when I realized like it was okay to be like, oh, I'm not gonna have this conversation because, well, I don't really know enough about the topic to go forth. Yeah. And sometimes even when I do know enough about the topic, but I don't want to argue, I'll be like, oh yeah, you know what? No, it's not something I really know about or am interested in. So yeah,
I was just in a situation the other day. People were talking about something and they were pretty passionate about it. And a person looked, and I was doing my own thing on the other side of the room. I was facilitating something. Yeah. I was doing my own thing on the other side of the room, and they kind of like brought me around, and they were like, "Oh, Heather, what do you think about this?" And I said, I don't really think about it. Yeah. That's it. And that's my response. Yeah. And and one person was like, "Oh, but," and I'm like, "No."
Well, and that's the other thing. So that's a good thing to do is you can actually just choose not to respond or to react. Like if you're not involved to begin with, and there's other people that you're trying to pull you into something, yeah, like you can choose to not react or to respond, and that is also valid. Again, I know a lot of people just don't. They feel compelled, like they always have to. Like someone asked you, and they have to put their input in. You don't. Like it's literally okay to just not get involved. And it's funny, like I was an adult before I realized like that was an option because it just wasn't the way things happened. Yes. In my life, up until that point. And I was like, oh wait, there's more options here.
And again, I am going to make this statement. That is the beautiful thing about being an adult. Right? The beautiful thing about
few. So let's embrace this, people.
Honestly, there is not a lot. Like I used to tell my kids all the time, be a kid as long as you can, right? Yeah. But the one thing about being an adult is you could really choose what you engage in. Yeah. That is like, if that is not the most freeing thing for you as a human being, like I choose not to engage in this. I choose to engage in this, whatever that looks like for you, right? And so it moves on to our next thing is about feeling overwhelmed. Like you're talking about people feel so overwhelmed or compelled that they have to answer.
Yeah.
right? They feel so overwhelmed and they have to give a response. And so my thought process here is, as long as you feel compelled that you have to respond and you can remain composed, that the subject is not getting you fired up, right? And you have composure about you for the subject, you have a perspective. You have a really good perspective of what you're talking about or what is being talked about. And then don't let it stress you out. Like, as soon as things start stressing you out, you need to be able to govern yourself, and you need to be able to say, I either choose to engage in this manner or I choose not to. Like,
Right. And I think the big thing here, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I
no, you're
think,
good.
and I find myself telling my kids this, and even myself sometimes, don't stress out. And I don't think that a lot of people know how to not stress out. Like, again, like, it's the reactionary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things happen and people just get stressed. And I think going back to mindfulness with this is like, sometimes that's it. Like, that stress response is the reaction. And again, like, stop, notice if you're having that reaction,
Right.
then maybe it's time to walk away, because don't get stressed doesn't even always work for some people. It's kind of like, what is it? Never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down when being told to calm down. Like, never, it just doesn't work. So it's like, instead of like, don't stress, is notice what's stressing you out.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself, like, use those interventions and take that break, and
Yes.
respectfully just kind of walk away.
And to piggyback on that, you might not even know what's stressing you out.
That is true.
I can tell you, I have removed myself from situations and sat in my car and said, I don't even know why I got fired up about that.
Yeah.
I don't even know what.
Several times.
And it takes me days. And then I can loop back around finally and be like, oh, remember that time?
Right. Or like 16, 26 different things happened that day. And like that, the tiniest little bit reminded you of something, like,
the other thing is,
from point B to Z to
never go into it hungry, never go into it tired.
The grocery store?
No, that too. But a difficult conversation.
No, I know.
I mean, honestly, like, when you are having conversations that possibly are difficult, going into it where your body just doesn't feel well. If you don't feel good, if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, if you're tired, like, and sometimes me and my husband have to do this. Like, it's like, you know what? I'm really not in a good space right now. Could we, like, move this conversation to another time?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just like, let the other person know that you're not blowing them off, that you are interested and concerned about what's going on, but you are definitely not in the headspace to discuss certain things. There are some days where, and we all have this. There are some days where you're focused, you're on top of your game, and it's something you can do. But like, if you didn't sleep the night before, or you have a headache or something else, you're sometimes just trying to be is a lot of work. So then when you have to think and account for someone else's feelings and all that, it can just be too much. So yeah, sometimes you just need to table things.
Let me just go down a couple more.
Absolutely.
Exercise, movement. Go for a walk, move your body. When stress settles in your body, you don't respond well. Moving your body changes the stress.
Thanks for listening to Friendship, Wellness, and Wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on social media for more updates. See you next time.
And have the conversation and be like, I reacted instead of responded. Can we try that again? So that's what we have for you. I'll put it in the notes. I hope this episode was helpful, and I hope you can respond more than react.
Thank you so much for being with us, guys. I really enjoyed exploring this topic. So if there's any topics that you would like to hear about, please put it in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to hear from you.
Bye.